I'm not going to lie and tell you that in certain situations I've said, listen, buddy, I already have one asshole in my pants. I don't need a second. I've used that several
The whole BAD
times.
is philosophy. It's a way of being, right? It's just being unapologetic, taking up space, commanding your worth, not backing down, calling out bullshit, just like doing your life on your own terms.
I'm Lisa Carmen Wang, and I'm the founder of the Bad Bitch Empire. Welcome, Bad Bitches. Today I'm here with Genine Fallon, the CEO of BLVCKOPS, helping educate and empower professional athletes and talent. She's spent her entire career building up women, underrepresented, and LGBTQ plus communities, and she previously built the sex toy company Pure Romance. Today, we're going to be talking about misogyny in the workplace, how to spot it, how to call it out, and what to do when that advisor or investor or colleague or random guy that you meet at a networking event starts hitting on you or, quote, accidentally touches you. Genine and I have both spent our entire careers in male-dominated industries, so today we're going to lift the veil on some of the bullshit that goes on in the background and how to really create the space to feel respected and be respected in the workplace. So Genine, welcome to the Bad Bitch Empire.
Thanks so much for having me.
One thing you told me, we just spent a weekend together in Austin at the Consensus Conference, a iconic crypto conference, was that you have been called a professional asshole whisperer. What does that mean, and how did that come about?
I think a friend was describing to another friend that I'm very good with strong personalities. So yes, so professional asshole whisperer. I think I've just had a long history of two things: dealing with strong personalities and being put into these situations like what happened to you in Austin and like what we're talking about today. You know, one of the favorite things that you said is, why do these people think that they get access to us in this way? You know, like this, my favorite, the side boob hug, right? Got a couple of those at Consensus. It's like, hi, it's so nice to see you. And you're like, ah. So I've been known for just turning around at that point. Like, are you kidding me right now? Like, really?
Yeah.
Right.
And do you actually call it out right then and there, or is it, we've all done the side maneuver where it's like, okay, let's just turn the other way.
I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I think 20-year-old me was probably, I would call it out, but I would probably try the side maneuver first, or to try to shift the situation or shift the conversation or turn my cheek or cross my arms or stand against a wall so I didn't get a hand on my lower back. 40-year-old me is not interested in doing that at all in any capacity. And I'm literally like, what the fuck? Like, what are you doing? So, yeah, complete different thing. And I think I've had to learn to be that way because, we have all done the side maneuver and it doesn't work. If somebody is that bold to behave like that, and you don't set a strong boundary, then they're just coming back for seconds and thirds. And the only thing that ends up happening is you questioning your own behavior and your own worth in the situation. So yeah, it's insane.
And I think it's really hard when you're in the moment when that happens, because you're just so, I think, stunned, especially in professional networking events or just professional settings, because I think it's very different than, for example, if you're just at a bar or at a social outing, because I think for me, being in those professional settings, it feels like there is something at stake, right? Your reputation, all these industry contacts. And so there isn't really that room to make a scene, especially because women are so easily labeled as crazy.
Right. Jealous. What is that? In the Beyonce song, they always try to make you look jealous or crazy. And it's like, no, I just don't want to be touched. Like, yeah. I'm not jealous, not crazy. Just don't want you to touch me.
Today's episode is brought to you by FTX US, the most complete crypto and finance app to buy and sell crypto with up to 85% lower fees than top competitors. You can trade NFTs with no fees, track your entire portfolio, and use a crypto-friendly debit card at millions of retailers. Plus, they're even launching stocks. Download the FTX US app by going to the link in the description and using the code BADBITCHES to earn free crypto on every trade over $10. Again, link in the description. Use code BADBITCHES to sign up so we can start investing and break the crypto boys club. All right, back to today's episode. When I went to Austin, I brought 2 girls with me who were part of the BBE team, and it was their first crypto conference, so they had never really experienced what that feels like. But at crypto conferences, it's over 90% male, and it didn't occur to me that I was actually numb to the fact that that's kind of gross and not normal until I saw it through their eyes. And we were going into one of these after hours networking events, and one of the girls just said, "Wow, it smells so bad in here. It's like sweaty, it smells like man." And she's like, I need to get out. I need fresh air. And I can't believe that this is what it looks like. And I think that really opened my eyes and said, yeah, this is not normal. And it is actually really uncomfortable. I've just become immune to it, of course, until, that an incident happened, which I'll talk about in a bit.
I think it's interesting that you say that. Like there's been several times in my career that I've worked with primarily women dominated companies. And so I understand like crypto, especially right now in consensus, very much felt like it was male dominated. And I want to double click on something. Like, I think you and I have a lot of masculine energy because of the careers that we have built and because of the space that we are in. But we're both very feminine presenting. So like we both like lace and leather and silk and clothes and things. And so I think that's one of the most interesting things. Like I enjoy being a girl. I like wearing dresses. I like having 12 outfit changes a day. I like, I like fixing, well, I don't like fixing my hair. I like when someone else fixes my hair. But
you like the end result.
Yeah, I like the end result. I'd love a beauty squad. But I think the interesting thing is it takes the joy out of any of those things and for the ability to be a woman when you're put in situations where that's used against you and it's used as a weapon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like we had that amazing brunch over at the mansion, which is, getting great things started. But it was interesting to see. It's like all of the women that came over there, we were all had been very thoughtful about what we were wearing. And it really is disturbing to put thought into something about yourself and to present yourself in a professional way and to still have conversations happening. I mean, I've had several times in my career where I've had to stop presentations because men were commenting on what I had, or I hear things like legs or ass or rack. And, for me, the first part of my career, I didn't say much. I very quickly learned that the best way to handle that is to call it out directly. And I think my line in my 20s was, listen, you couldn't afford it or handle it, so stop talking about it. And then as I've continued to get a little bit older, I don't even need to do any of that. It's just kind of stopping and staring at them in one of those uncomfortable silences. Like, is this how you were raised? I am a single mom. I do work around a lot of men. I am blessed that a large majority of those men are extremely respectful, but just by sheer numbers, I come across a lot of men that do the side boob hug. I was in a situation last year where it was a business meeting and I had somebody at the business meeting reach over and grab my breast. And I was in such shock. And, I built a sex toy company. Like, it's very, very difficult to shock me about a large majority of situations. And it didn't happen once, it happened 3 times. And there were other people there witnessing it. They looked shocked. The only person that didn't seem shocked was, the grabber. And I thought about it and I'm like, gosh, 2 things. One, I was really glad that it happened to me and not to any of the younger gals that worked at the company. And 2, for me specifically, I realized what a low blow that was, right? So here I'm in the middle of a meeting and I've done something pretty great for all of us and brought together a lot of things and not only created the table we were sitting at, but had a seat at the table. And now I'm getting my boob grabbed. Like, and then
so did you say anything? Did anybody say anything?
I was shocked. Everybody was shocked. But the first thing that was said by the grabber was, "They're great, really perky." And I'm like, you're just kind of, it's in slow motion. It's like that Matrix thing where you're like, what is going on right now? And like, if I don't move, this isn't happening. And so then it happened 2 more times. And the third time I was like, enough, absolutely enough.
And was he in a position of power?
Yes. And so I think, as we talked about having this conversation, I think a very good point is really what I believe misogyny is, which is, there's two things. One, by definition, it's the hatred of women. So that kind of lends itself to some of these actions. Like, you wouldn't do these things if you respected somebody. It feels like it comes out of hatred, number one,
Mhm.
and disrespect. And then number two, it's an abuse of power, right? I think that
Mhm.
that's the thing that's very difficult to swallow, is the abuse of power. And as a lot of, I think, women can testify, and maybe in men as well, you sit and think to yourself, what gives this person the right to do this, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I've seen this show up in my career of not being paid for things because they thought they were gonna, I don't know, pay me in compliments and hugs. And I'm like, that's not really how this works. I'm
I
like,
need money. I don't
yeah.
need I give myself compliments. Come on.
Yeah, I'm like, thanks. So yeah, definitely an abuse of power. I mean, and
Yeah.
your story, what happened to you? I
Yeah.
mean, this is how we started talking
Yeah.
about this.
Well, I mean, it was just really insane because I was at a event of a like respected fund and firm in the industry, and I was just waiting in line at the bar, and it was one of those open bar events, and this man starts talking to me, and he's tall, he's older, he's white, and at first we're talking about work, and then when we get to the bar, he says, "What would you like to drink?" And I tell him to drink, and I think practically it's an open bar. There's a lot of people. This man is taller, can get to the bar sooner and
Right.
faster, and so I said, "Great." But as we're standing there, then he does the lower back hand movement and asks me where I'm from, and it's just like, wait a minute, why is that hand on the small of my back?
And
And
you
then
do this, as
they
we
do
all do. You're like,
yeah, and then maneuver to the side, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna. And I think it's just I felt these like weird vibes, and so I just said, I thought to myself, I don't need the drink here. I just said, I'm gonna go speak to another group. I gotta go see my friend. And so then I am speaking in a group of about 4 or 5 people, and while I'm talking, it's about 2 guys and a couple girls, and next thing I know, he's come up and he slaps my ass from behind, hands me my drink, and says, "Here you go," and walks away. And
it's
and
so
everyone
funny.
was
I'm
shocked.
so in shock that this happened.
I know. It's like I think there's been enough time that's kind of passed for me to process it and like kind of see it as like it's like a learning situation, and plus like I mean basically everyone there was shocked. Even the guys were like, "Wow, I can't believe this actually happens. Like I just saw that." And the thing is, it was fight, flight, or freeze, and I froze. I'm like, and he walked away, and so one of the women was like, I'm gonna fight him. I'm gonna f him up, And remember, this is like a 6 foot, I don't know, 3 or
Yeah.
like a big guy, and I'm a 5'2", petite woman, and I think I was just torn because I was like, do I go up to him? Do I say something? Do I have someone else say something? But what I did know is the last thing I wanted was to be back in his space. I didn't want to be anywhere near him. It was a
Right.
complete violation of my space, my body, my boundaries. And so what I ended up doing was talking to one of the partners of the firm who was holding the event, and I said, "This is what happened. You need to talk to him." And I think this is the importance of leveraging allies and really figuring out who are the male
Right.
allies who can do something about it. And so he told me this guy's name, and he says, I'll make sure to take care of him. And I think that felt really good, but ultimately even just being in that space for the rest of the couple hours was really uncomfortable because I felt his eyes on me. I felt him signal to me. I had to avert my gaze as I was walking across the room, and it just, yeah, it
and
really
and
it
even
really
leaving,
sucked.
and even leaving the event, right? It's like you
Yeah.
you almost get put in a position where y- you feel like going back to the fight, flight, or freeze. Like, when my boob was grabbed, same thing. I froze. I was like, what is happening? You're like, okay, this happened. It's gonna stop. Oh, it's happening again. And then you kind of wake up and you're like, all right, now I need to address this. But there's also, I think it's a learned thing, is, when you're a little girl and everyone says to you, be nice. Go say hi to
Good
that
girl
person.
brainwashing.
Good girl brainwashing. you know, go be nice. Like, and then, you don't want to hurt their feelings. Well, no, but I also don't want his hand on my lower back, and I don't want to be assaulted in the middle of a work
Slapped.
meeting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's sad to me that we even have to think that way. And, again, and the gals that we brought, the younger gals that were there, like, you know, whether or not they have, to your point, like we all know, we talked about this, we all know the side hustle. Like you're the shift and you're kind of like dipping, or the older gentlemen that come in for the face kiss, and they come straight in, and then you're like, okay, hi, it's nice to see you, and then so it is sad and it's weird.
Yeah.
And then doubly weird trying to figure out how to get out of the situation again, because they're still making eyes at you and haven't picked up on, like, this is uncomfortable and inappropriate, right?
Yeah. I think the weird thing is like they just actually think that there's nothing wrong. And I can only imagine how many ass slaps he's given or how many like boob grabs he's done, or just because, I think what made me feel better, and I think the next morning once I slept on it and I reached back out to that partner, and I said to him, like, I need you to speak to the people who organize this event, your firm, others in the industry, and make sure that this guy is called out. And I expressed to him I was really uncomfortable. It's like that this happened and that he didn't take the hint. And I think what really did feel good is that, as allyship, what true allyship is he said, I did talk to him last night, and he said he was freaking out and pissed off. And I love this
He was
comment. He
pissed
said, I
off.
told him, yeah, I was like, I told him and he said, I told him, of everyone in this room, you're the one person he doesn't want to piss off, that you have a platform and voice that can raise or shatter mountains. And then he says this guy went on a rant that was nearly unintelligible. And I thought, I was like, first of all, that felt good. But second of all, I was like, why did it's so funny that he got pissed off.
No,
And then,
it's so predictable, because he did something wrong and he's being held accountable now. So, a lot guilty people tend to get, in
redirect and
quotes, pissed
deflect.
off, and it's a redirection. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. It's a redirect.
It's like really thinking through. I think for me, even in that moment, I didn't even, again, about this idea of being numb, I didn't even realize how bad that was until I saw the reactions of others on behalf of me. And so I think sometimes, like, when you're in a position of, whether you've been harassed or something inappropriate has happened, it's think about, like, what would you tell your girlfriend? How protective would you be over your best friend if that happened to her? And like to have that same level of almost indignance and demanding of respect for yourself as you would a friend.
Yeah, and I think, one of the other things that we talked about too is like access, right? Like how, like having a safe space and having the words and like the prompts and the motions like ready to like say in case these things
Mm-hmm.
happen is super important.
Yeah.
We had given, some of the girls that we were talking to those one-liners, and I don't remember all of them, but I just
Yeah.
very much remember it's like it's that question, like, why do you believe that you have access to me in this way?
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
asking
yeah,
that
because
question.
that was like I think the example is another conversation that I had with a guy at the conference, and we were talking about work, and then he just says, well, now that I've seen this logical and business side of you, what other sides are there? And I was just like, what did you say? And it was like he felt entitled to that, and I just said, of course there are other sides to me. There's the feminine, the vulnerable, the emotional, but that, like, you don't get access to that until you've gained my trust. That takes
Right, you earn
time.
that. You earn that,
Yeah.
and that's something that I offer to you. Maybe not, but yeah, you
Not
earn
because
it.
you asked me at a bar.
Right, with your hand on my lower back after we're having a business discussion.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like I think that's like this also idea of like embracing the masculine and the feminine and the everything in between, right? And saying that, like, there are different sides of myself I can turn on, and there are many, many sides to all of us, but like I think there's also these things when people talk about being authentic and be fully yourself at work, but there's also times where you're like, I don't want to give you my whole self because this is a business conversation.
Correct. And the reminding that it is a business conversation, right? And I appreciate it. I mean, even as many years as I've been in business and things that I've had, like, it was a good reminder in the language that you used for me to have prepared, exactly to your point. Like, yes, there are other sides to me, but no, you do not get access. And then just to be quiet, right? And be like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no more conversation past this. And also, you said something that's important, like you get immune to it. Yeah, I think at times you just get so tired of having to deal with the same issue over and over again that sometimes you just want to let it go, but you can't, because if you let it go, then you risk it happening again, right? And I wanted to also point out, I know I'm big on definitions of things, and I said earlier about misogyny being a definition of the hatred of women. And one of the interesting things is I've also experienced that same kind of energy from other women. I like to refer to it as professional mean girls, which I really don't
Mm-hmm.
understand, because I love working with you, all the Bad Bitch Empire, all the women that we've met over the past period of time, and the women we're going to continue to meet. But there's definitely something to be said for the same energy and some behaviors that may not be necessarily sexual, but just that same inappropriateness that kind of happens in professional mean girl world.
Well, that's the zero sum game, what we call like queen bee syndrome, and I think that's still a legacy from the previous generation where there physically weren't enough seats for women at the table. It was like there could be one token woman, but I think we've entered a new generation where that sort of queen bee behavior that says it's either you or me, not the new paradigm which says it's us and we're better together. Like if you actually act in that old way, it's just detrimental to everyone.
Absolutely.
Going to some of those one liners, or just like having, because I think freezing in the moment when something shitty happens to you is almost inevitable. And I also like don't think it's appropriate to like emotionally react, like get really really angry, because the other
Yeah.
thing is like as women, on average, we don't have the physical advantage. Like in this case, this guy was like 6'4", I'm 5'2". He's obviously bigger. If it was just the space of the two of us, I don't have that physical advantage. And I think that what I've learned is like, especially with those types of men who aren't woke and like seeing the way he redirected his anger later, like if I had reacted in a way that was like, you know fuck you, get out of my way, don't touch me, like angry, I actually think that would make it worse.
Oh,
But
absolutely, because it creates more drama for him to then react to. So I think two things. One, I said this to you and you told me originally. I think you did the right thing. I think the freeze was the right thing to do in the moment, because it allows you to take a step back and be in a place of observation. And also, you know what? Reacting is a thing, right? We all know that we do that, but if we talk about this, it allows you to place yourself in a place of being responsive versus reactive. And
mhm.
I think you did the absolute right thing. You avoided, you stayed away, and then addressed it the next day with somebody that could advocate for you and all of the other women that are there and those events going forward. So I don't think anybody should ever feel bad about the freeze, mechanism.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie and tell you that in certain situations I've said, listen, buddy, I already have one asshole in my pants. I don't need a second. I've used that several times. But, those situations it was appropriate, whether I was at a very loud function or, to your point, I felt safe enough to do that because of the people that I was with. So I've handled things that way. I've handled things quietly, like, step back. I've also done exactly what you've done, which is wait until the next day to address them. So I don't know that there is a right thing to do other than to make sure that you are responsive versus reactionary.
Yeah. I mean, I like the line that you'd said of like what who raised you? Or
Yeah, who
what was
raised you?
that's like insult your parents, like insult insult the mama.
Yeah.
Um, but the other woman that I was with, we were actually playing this game as we were kind of seeing the asshole versus the genuine allies, and we would say like it's a guessing game, like, oh, he had a good mom, like he had a good mom, because it was like, oh, if he was raised by a good mom, like he's a good guy who's learned how to listen, who's learned how to respond, how to create respectful spaces for women. And then if he like didn't have that powerful female figure in his life, he didn't learn how to respect women, and now they're
Or
acting out.
or powerful
male
men in
figure.
his life. They're
Yeah.
a male influence that is an advocate for women. I mean, God help. I have 14-year-old, or almost 14-year-old boy twins. God help either of them if I ever hear that anything's gone on that's
Mhm.
disrespectful towards women in that vein, because nobody else will have to get to them. They'll probably be pulling me off of them. Like I would
Yeah.
handle that. So, but at the same time, like, my kids are lucky because they have two respectful parents, right? Their father's teaching them to be a gentleman, and I am as well. So, yeah, it's like, who raised you? Like,
Mhm.
what barn did you grow up in that you believe that this behavior is okay?
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
There's this story that I think is applicable here, and it's like a parable of these two sons, and they had a abusive alcoholic father, and he would hit his wife and come back late, be super angry, and just like was always absent. And so as the two boys grew into men and they got married, they had families. One of the men, he treats his wife like a queen, wonderful father, doesn't drink a lick of alcohol. And then the other brother becomes just like his dad and is alcoholic, beats his wife, absent father. And when asked, the both of them, the same question, why do you think you turned out the way you did? They both responded the same way. And they said, well, with a father like mine, how could I turn out any different?
Yeah,
And
that's powerful.
so I think there's something also to be said about like, that's everyone, you can't control what situation you come from, but you have a responsibility and you can, change that narrative in the direction you want. Or you can say, well, that's just how it is, and succumb to being an asshole in this case.
Yeah, it's like it's a choice, right? All of these actions and situations are a choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what else can people say? I think that line of like who raised you kind of hits deep, but I also thought like what makes you think that's appropriate? Like what makes you think that that's okay?
I also like, help me understand how this is
Mm,
appropriate, with a
mm,
long pause and a stare. Like, help me understand. You're not pointing the finger, you're just, it's like, that this is not okay. Help me understand. There's a teaching moment there. And while it's not our responsibility to teach, sometimes questioning people, and I think you have to decide based on the energy, right? The energy of the
mm,
situation. You didn't feel comfortable confronting him in that way, but there could be other situations, that you would. The other guy that asked you about the other sides of you, you were able to like verbalize a conversation, and you were like, what are you even talking about? So, yeah, help me understand who raised you. If they're really aggressive, I already have one asshole in my pants. I don't need a
mm.
second. That works. That has worked because they're a little shocked that I said it.
Yeah.
Trying to think of other things that I have said.
Well, I think the general framework is there's like when you think about languaging, a lot of times when you look at the data about how women speak versus how men speak and the language of dominance versus submission, it's like women tend to use I and me a lot more. So it's inward facing, like I feel, I think,
Yes.
I'm not sure, I. And then men often use the language of dominance, which is you. You think of a manager and employee, and the manager is like, when are you turning in the report? When are you going to be done with this? And then the submissive says, oh, I'll be done with this soon. I am working on this. I think it'll be okay. So in these situations, I think I've learned that in order to switch the power dynamic, because what the man is doing is he's putting the focus on you, which is that outward dominant like control of the situation. And so if you then react and say, like, I'm feeling like this. I don't know, like I don't feel good. I feel uncomfortable. He's actually
It
getting
keeps it
exactly what he
cyclical.
wants from you.
Right,
Yeah. And
right.
so the response, it's not even about like the exact words or the exact line to use. It's like, what makes you think this is appropriate? Help me understand why you think this is appropriate, or
It's
who
controlling the
raised
narrative.
you.
Right, it's
Yeah, and
controlling
like
the narrative.
redirecting to them, being like, "Hey, this is your issue. Tell me why you are doing this," versus allowing them to like have that spotlight on you when it's like really not about you. It's like let's analyze you.
Right. Like, let me take a step back and let's change that. Let's course correct the narrative, right? Like one of my biggest pet peeves in life is historical revisionism. And I think that you're absolutely correct. This is one of those situations where had you exploded in any way, shape, or form in that confrontation, he would have grasped onto that to make it look like you were, again, crazy or a bitch or you were bitter or you were just unfun. And it's like, no, actually, I'm not any of those things. So the appropriate thing to do was to put the spotlight on him in any way that you possibly can, and the truth, and in the appropriate amount of time, whether it's immediate or after the fact, and hold them accountable, right? There's no more, no less. It's like, what's going on here? Why
Yeah.
did you do blank?
I don't know if you've ever watched Game of Thrones, but you know how Arya Stark has her like kill list?
Yeah.
Man, I've got that list. that that guy's on this list. And yeah, so I think
We
the
all
other thing too is just I know.
we all
And it's just it's like a matter of time. I was like, you'll know. It's like the art of war. Like when you're strong, like you'll know when it's ready to strike.
Yeah, and I think I think the biggest thing for women and anybody that's been in this position where there's somebody of authority and power and it's being abused is like telling the truth, right? Like not being
Mm-hmm.
afraid to tell the truth and knowing that you're going to have there's advocates out there, right? Men and women, and that it's not okay, and the worst thing that can happen that stays in the dark and then it happens to somebody else. Had this thing happen to you in Austin and you not said anything, can you imagine how many more cocktail parties if he was coming to NYC NFT? It's like it just allows the cycle to continue. So it's kind of there's a responsibility on our behalf, the person that this is happening to kind of put a stop to it and shine a big light on it, and then not own the reaction. It's not our responsibility to own their reaction. It's our responsibility to address what happened, and there's a number of ways to do that, but it's not our responsibility to own the reaction. It's their behavior. They have to be accountable for.
Yeah. And I mean, I think in this instance, I do feel lucky that it wasn't worse. It was like enough to shock me and, make me feel like pretty bad for actually a couple of days after I was like processing it. But I think the other thing about being a bad bitch is like, there's so much stuff that happens. And I was like, I can't let this derail me. I can't let this, like, I've got an empire to build. I do not have the time or the energy to waste on this bullshit. Like, so I told the ally and I was like, you take care of this. It's like, there's something about really powerful when men in power talk to other men in power and say, this is not okay. Because I think, like,
Right.
I don't even know if that guy would, like, take me seriously at all, and or, like, try to do something worse if I was, like, standing in front of him.
Well, it drives it home, right? Because now he's been seen, the behavior's been seen, and now it's being handled. So it shouldn't be you alone. That's why we have, allies and advocates. And it just goes to speak to the difference between men and boys, right? The ally and the advocate was the man, and the boy was the person doing these behaviors. So yeah, it's absolutely necessary to have people advocate.
Yeah. Another thing that I would just say is like, I think I'm increasingly learning to listen to my gut instinct and that feeling of like, hey, this feels a little uncomfortable. And it's always like thinking back to those situations where you're like, you always knew that this guy was like a little bit off, or just like it didn't feel great, or you kind of like brushed aside the like uncomfortable vibe that he gave off, and then lo and behold, like that ends up being the guy who is like the perpetrator.
When I parent, one of the questions I always ask my sons, but I've translated this into business, is what is your intention? Right? So whether it's a direct question to somebody I work with, or as I'm navigating a meeting or project or any person I come across, is what is their intention? Right? And so what was that man's intention? It wasn't to make you feel comfortable. It wasn't to make you feel empowered. It wasn't to make you feel smart, seen, appreciated, engaging. It wasn't to secure new business. It was literally negative intent to get whatever need on his end met at your expense. So I think a gut check question that I use a lot in personally and professionally is, what is the intention? Does this person have a pure intention? If they don't, then there's a different set of rules to, engage and act accordingly.
That's really powerful because it, like, I think when you spell it out like that, it's like yeah, that was literally nothing. There was literally nothing professional about that. There was nothing positive about it at all. It was just to whatever his sad attempt at getting attention, like female attention, that he probably struggles to
Yeah.
get most of his life.
Feed his ego or make himself feel better or whatever it was. It's, you know, it was an abuse of power and it had negative intent associated with it. So your gut was probably tapped into the negative intent. And I think the
Yeah.
more that we can organize situations into positive and negative intent, the more we can, avoid those situations. There's a many of the
Yeah.
situations because you go back and reflect. And I've known situations where people have had negative intent, and I can say at times I've chosen to ignore it because I'm exhausted and I have other priorities. I'm building something. I'm trying to get through a meeting. I have, you know, other business priorities, but the best thing I've ever done is stopped what I was doing and addressed it. And maybe that's
Mm.
another good conversation to put in the repertoire is, what is your intention? I ask that
Mm.
question a lot, and every time I've asked it, if somebody has a negative intent, they can't answer the question.
Mm.
If a
So
positive
you get
intention,
silence.
they have an instantaneous response. If they don't, it's because they're in the middle of a spin and they have to stop to think to lie about something. But test it out. The
Mm.
next time you're with somebody and you're feeling off, ask them what their intention is and see how many stutters you get.
Mm. Yeah. And that's a great question. Yeah, because I just think about all these interactions and like oftentimes it's such shallow conversation. It's like, what do you do? Where are you from? And then like that kind of guy is always like, here's my track record, and it's just like, and I have another fund, and I have another million, and I jet set around the world. Like, okay, great. Um,
Like my favorite Instagram account, Super Snake, where it has all the like stereotypical like crypto bro in Miami at the crypto conference wearing, the strip club hat with the Lamborghini. It's all fodder, but it's very funny because those stereotypes aren't far off, as we just saw.
I think with the markets just tanking, I know everyone who's in those Lamborghinis and like at the strip clubs is hurting right now. So there's a little
Yes.
bit of Schadenfreude.
They say that you can't spell crypto without cry. I saw that meme yesterday and I
Oh,
laughed.
really?
Yeah, can't spell
Yeah.
crypto without cry.
Anything else that we need to talk about? Like, I'm just thinking about maybe precautions, like going into events, being prepared, knowing that this type of stuff is unfortunately going to keep happening. There will always be people who are abusing positions of power or positions of strength to take advantage of, I mean,
Yep.
women who are vulnerable, right?
I think something that, after years of building a sex toy company and working in that industry, first and foremost, I can honestly tell you that I was extremely respected, and it was an extremely respectful workplace with all of the men and women. And so I've treasured that all of the years that I was there and the years since. Because we all make jokes about working in that industry, but it was a very important industry because it was a door opener to a lot of conversations for women about self-worth. Like the conversation of sex at that time when Sex in the City came out and we were building this company. So, but I want to say how respectful everybody that worked there in the company were. But something that I learned there that is very important is there is a large difference in conversation that is feminine versus sexual, right? So there's a difference between having strong feminine energy and having a femininity about yourself and in your conversation versus sexual energy. So it's just
Mm.
something to kind of keep in the back of your head, as a gut check. Again, like, is what I'm talking about, is it feminine because it's coming like from a feminine energy, or is it overly sexual? Now, not blaming anybody. I'm just, giving people things to think about.
Mm. Well, there was actually an example of this also at one of the events that I went to. A guy came up to me and he said, "I love your style. Like, this is a great outfit." And so he had a girl. He's like, "My girlfriend works in XYZ, but I'm sure you get this compliment a lot that you're one of the most fashionable people in the room." And I was like, "Thank you." Like, that was a
Lovely.
genuine compliment. It wasn't sexual. It was just like, I did put effort into my outfit. Thank you.
Yes,
And I'm
and I think
glad
it's
someone
great.
noticed.
And it's lovely that he brought it up and he did it in a respectful way. And that goes
Yeah.
back to my comment about I like being a girl. I spend a lot of time on outfits and dresses and all of those things, and so it's nice to be complimented for that, but in a respectful way.
Yeah. Yeah. So like what can people do to create a more like respectful space?
I think the intention question. I think you should ask yourself the intention question. What is my intention with this? Am I saying this to genuinely give somebody a compliment, or am I saying this to get something? Right? What is my
Mm-hmm.
own intention? I ask myself that a lot.
The other thing that I think about is just like the power of the word no at the end of the day. Sometimes just a no or a no thank you is really strong. And then to respect when someone says no and
Yes.
not try and push, not try
Yes.
and like invalidate that no, I think is also really important.
And not blowing these situations off, giving yourself enough grace to allow yourself time to respond appropriately, but not not brushing it under the rug. That doesn't help anybody.
This has been a great conversation on misogyny and calling out bullshit, and I hope that for all of you listening that it's been helpful. You've gotten some new tools in your toolkit to go out and be a bad bitch in business. And so Janine, final question for you. What does being a bad bitch mean to you?
It means being unapologetic in all aspects of my life and being able to have unflinching honesty.
Love it. Well, we love having you in the Bad Bitch Empire.
I love being here. Thank you.